This time I'll call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We have an agenda before us. There was a request to remove agenda item number 7. And the reason for that removal is that the Ways and Means Committee needs to have some discussion and review of that prior to it coming to the council. Are there any other changes to the agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. Then the first item would be to consider the minutes of the work session and the regular session. Both of those meetings were held on April 9th. So the council does have the minutes of both of those meetings. Are there any corrections to note at this time?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to approve the minutes as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and that motion does pass. We'll move on then to agenda item number 3. This consider the approval of the minutes of the local Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting that was held on April 15th, 2019. Once again, the council does have the minutes of that meeting. I'd entertain any corrections or a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim to approve as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Close the voting. Motion passes. We'll note 1 abstention. We'll move then to agenda item number 4. This is award of bids. We have 3 items that we'll act on this evening for awarding of bids. The first would be the bituminous resurfacing on various city streets. We have a resolution before us that would accept the bids. I'll ask Glenn Olson, Director of Public Works, City Engineer, to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We did have 2 bids for the project, and we are recommending Dunnick Incorporated to do the work in the amount of $537,234 and 20 cents, and with the authorization to go up to a maximum of the budgeted amount of $575,000.
Any questions for Glenn? If not, is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by John, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. We'll close the voting. And the motion passes. Agenda item number 5, Huron Road, Superior Road reconstruction. Once again, we have a resolution that would accept the low bid on this project. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you can see by the summary of bids, there was significant interest and kind of a wide variety of the bid amounts. 4 of the bids came in below our estimate, 1 above, and we would recommend approval for R&G Construction of Marshall, amount of $787,018. If you have any questions, I'd certainly take them.
Any questions for Glenn?
Glenn, just a question. Your original engineer's estimate was about $170,000 higher. Is that unusual? I mean, we got very competitive bids or anything, all of the above probably?
It's all of the above, but really what we do is we took last year's bid prices and increased them a little bit over for cost of living, and really that's what we use for our estimate. One was over our bid, but the other ones were very competitive. You can see the other ones were generally a couple $100,000 under that estimate. So we're happy to see that. I think they're good prices, so we'll take advantage of it. We discussed this, I think, last fall even, when the council was interested in getting those bids out as soon as possible so they didn't run into the late part of spring to get bids. And this might be a little reflection of that as well.
And I guess that's what I I think I told Assistant Engineer Jason about that. He said, it'd be nice if we could bid some of these projects earlier,
Yep.
not only maybe to get more competitive pricing, but also to be done earlier in the fall, so we don't have to worry, God forbid we have snow in October, but, we
Like
have
we've
had it
had.
happen,
Yep.
So,
No.
yeah, I guess I would encourage staff to continue to try and get these bids out earlier because, and I kind of have to eat crow on this one because we got very, very competitive bids. So, thank you.
Any other questions?
Move approval.
Second. Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and the motion does pass. Move then to agenda item number 6, consider bids for the award of Liberty Park restroom project. I'll call on Preston Stensrud from our Parks Department. We have quotations that are close from 2 local bidders.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yep, before you tonight is the Liberty Park restroom, would be the second restroom in our improvement plan of upgrading facilities throughout our parks. We did get 2 proposals, one from Bladholm Construction, one from Doom and Kuipers. Like the mayor mentioned, very competitive bids. They're within $746 on $77,000. I didn't recommend an approval or the low proposal necessarily because I think there might potentially be some value in Doom and Kuipers also building this facility as they're building Justice so that all of our buildings look similar or the same, using the same block, same color, all that stuff. And also, Steve Doom did draw the floor plan of the building at no charge to us, which most people wouldn't normally do that. So I'm supportive of either contractor. I just feel that there's an argument for both, and again, I'm fine with either one. So.
Craig?
So the drawing that Doom and Kuiper did, was that actually used on for both parties for bidding?
Yep, because that was the only way we could really
Apples
get
to
the
apples.
exact same drawing and apples to apples. And it's a really simple building, but yet I didn't want to go to architect and have to
Right.
pay those fees either, so.
Glenn?
So the materials are basically the same type of materials. I was looking at the roof. Is it steel roof then?
Yep, standing
For both
seam.
of them?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. The only thing I think we could potentially is, and I don't know, would be block vendors. Block vendors have different choices of color, that if, just for some consistency, but not that it's a big deal if we don't do that either, it's just a thought, so.
Just one more question. On the ceiling, it's plywood, correct?
Yeah,
And-
painted, like with epoxy painted.
Okay.
But plywood epoxy painted and sealed.
Pre-finished type? All right.
The one that like they did at Justice, they painted at their shop and then installed it and did one final coat once it was installed, so.
I was just curious about some you have permanent facing on it or whatever,
Yeah.
and lower maintenance.
Yeah,
and-
this, the epoxy finish and seal, you should be able to
That'll
wash it off
last a
and
long
stuff.
time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Very maintenance friendly because it's all block. And they should be around for a long, long time, so.
Other questions?
Preston, just I have a couple questions. On the Bladholm bid, it says storage onto the building. Did you put storage in this building?
Nope, that's actually, I carried over the Justice RFP and I actually just missed that. It shouldn't have even been in there, so.
And my other question is that in the one drawing, I believe it could be from Bladholm, it's just got one unisex bathroom. Are there going to be male, female, and unisex, or just?
Nope, this
Just
one
one
at
use?
Liberty due to the space confinements with the river there.
Okay.
And if you're looking at the playground now, there's a little doghouse looking thing. It's got the water meter in. We have the water and sewer stub to there. And basically with our space, that's all we have room for, just a single family restroom. So,
My last question, on the Doom and Kuipers bid, it says the final building will be cleaned by the owner, seating and sodding by the owner, and that's going to be consistent with both?
yep,
Okay.
yep. I should also mention that I think we had 75,000 budgeted, so we're slightly over that. I took the numbers from the Justice Park per square foot, and it didn't quite equal out just because it's a smaller building. So,
I would assume then you have that extra in your budget.
yeah, we could find it, or some of the other equipment we bought came in under budget, so we can make it up with that.
Other questions?
I'm not sure if I followed that correctly or not, but, the picture we have here is 2 rooms. One is the bathroom and one is the storage then?
Well, it's actually would be like the mechanical, where like the water meter.
Water heater and stuff?
The breakers, electrical, that stuff would be, but it's not like a storage room, just
Okay,
a
that's-
small
okay.
janitor closet essentially, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? So you have 2 close recommendations, or 2 close bids and 1 recommendation.
Well, on this, and like Preston said, Doom and Kuipers drew it up, and they're both excellent contractors. They both do excellent work. There's an expense in drawing. I'm in the process of drawing a commercial project or a project such as this now. It's $1,000 to get that done. So I think it's fair to award it, and I'd make a motion to award it to Doom and Kuipers because they did the extra work drawn, and I'd like to make that a motion.
Motion by
I'll second
Jim,
that.
seconded by Craig. Discussion? If there's no discussion, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion does pass.
Thank you.
Preston. We'll move then to the consent agenda. We'll note that agenda item number 7 was removed, and if we bring the rest of the items up on the consent agenda. And they include, consider the amendment, or the, number 7 was removed. Next would be consider the approval of the amendments to the interfund loan resolution for TIF 1-5 for the Marshall Hotel project. Consider the approval of refuse haulers license for West Central Sanitation Inc. of Wilmer, Minnesota. Consider the approval of a transient merchant license for Frankie's Hot Dogs LLC. And on that one, we do have a letter on that, that the council has. Consider the authorization to declare vehicles as surplus property for Marshall Police Department. Consider the Commerce Industrial Park farm lease for 2019. Consider the authorization of acceptance of the HMEP grant for the Southwest Chemical Assessment Team, and to authorize the Director of Public Safety / Chief Jim Marshall to administer the grant. Consider the application for the on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Marshall Convention and Visitors Bureau for May 17th, 2019 event, and then finally consider the approval of the bills and project payments. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Number 8.
Any other item? Number 8 and number 11 will be removed from the consent agenda. Any other items? With the remaining items, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Steve,
Second?
seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting.
Mine isn't working.
Not letting me submit.
Okay. Reopen. So we can refresh.
There.
Everybody in?
Yep.
Close the voting. And the motion passes. Okay, so now we'll move to agenda item number 8. Glenn?
Just maybe a quick comment or thought here. I believe that this originally started out as an interfund loan of about $200,000, and then a few years ago we changed it to $350,000, and now it's being changed to $500,000. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
That's it? Okay, is there any other questions about agenda item number 8?
Move we approve?
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We'll have a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Kyle, you have the vote? Motion passes. Agenda item number 11. Jim?
I pulled this one, and I just, so Sharon and Officer Winker can explain. There's a 2013 Dodge that was forfeited. That I thought would maybe be good for city use, and I'm sure other people read that. And they explained to me why it wouldn't be. And I just want them to have an opportunity to explain to the public why we wouldn't do that.
Thanks, Jim. And Officer Jeff Winker. So, Jeff.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor and Council. In reference to the 2013 Dodge Ram, that was actually a forfeit vehicle, and by statute, we can only use that for police use and/or the funds from that vehicle for police use to combat drugs and alcohol and that sort of thing. So, looking at it, this vehicle actually has some pretty good damage to it. It's probably at least $5,000 or $6,000 worth of damage to it. I do have some photos if you guys want to take a quick look. But I mean, I guess if you get it at a cheap enough price where that's going to be worth fixing, I don't know. That's up to you.
It's pretty high miles too, isn't it?
The battery was dead, so I couldn't really check, but I know the director said when it came in, he was under the impression it had like 160,000 on it, somewhere in that ballpark.
Looks like it was rode a little hard.
Yeah, it was a contractor that was in town doing some repairs, and so,
Not vehicle repairs, right?
yeah, it looked like he was living in it too, so.
What's wrong with that?
So with that, Jim, you want to make a motion?
Pictures, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Looking at them.
Any other questions for Jeff?
Well, the reason I brought it up is I know I'm looking at a 2011 used pickup, and they're $17,000 yet. And that's why, I don't know, mileage, you don't know what the motor, because this vehicle still has a value of $15,000, $16,000.
Repaired.
Repaired, correct. So that's what I was looking at, but I see it's pretty beat up, so I think I'll make the motion to surplus property.
Second.
Motion by Jim, seconded by Craig. Discussion? That will put it on the online auction, and maybe we'll bring a good price.
It could, yeah.
And I hope you're correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Voice?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Move then to agenda item number 16. Agenda item number 16 is introduction, is the action that's requested for a map amendment for rezoning, request made by James Carr, Marshall, Minnesota, at 701, 703, 705, 800, 801, 802, 803, 804, 805, 806, 807, 900, 901, 902, 903, 904, and 905 Andrew Street. Ilya Gutman is with us, and he will present this, and again, the action is to introduce.
Thank you, Mayor Council. This is a request to rezone the properties which are shown here along Andrew Street. This is a request by James Carr, who owns all those properties. According to the owner, the intent is to start to build triplexes there. So for that purpose, they have to be rezoned from single family to multiple family, 1 to 4 family units. And as you can see, south of that thing, the property is already zoned 1 to 4 family units, so it will be contiguous. So the recommendation is to approve it, and in this case, to introduce it. And the Planning Commission met and recommended the same thing.
Any comments from the Planning Commission? Glenn?
There were a few citizens there that had concerns about the
Correct.
fact that it was going to multifamily instead of single family. I just wanted to bring that point up, so.
Questions for Ilya? If not, is there a motion to introduce this request?
So move.
Second.
Motion by Russ, seconded by Jim. Discussion?
Just a point of reference, I had an opportunity to visit with Mr. Carr today, and I don't know if he wants to make a comment, but he told me that there, instead of triplex, there might be some duplexes in there as well, so, yeah.
I just repeated what was told
Correct,
during
yeah.
the Planning Commission meeting.
I just wanted that on record, so, yeah.
Any other discussion?
I think another point is that, you know, the houses that are going to be built on here, the property, the dwellings that are going to be built on this property, they're not going to be cheap property. I mean, they're going to be well-built structures, and so
That was,
it's not going to be something that decreases the value of the neighborhood.
That was the comment from the owner during the meeting.
Any other discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion does pass. Thank you, Ilya. We'll move then to agenda item number 17. This is a request for a map amendment for rezoning of 1213, 1215, and 1217 West Main Street. This has been introduced. It's here for action this evening. Ilya?
Thank you, Mayor Council. So this rezoning was introduced in the previous council meeting. The request is by Doug and Peggy Anderson. They own the shop, the metal shop here, and they want to expand it into these areas. So since what they have right now is manufacturing, this area will have to be rezoned to manufacturing in order for them to be able to expand. So the recommendation, and you can see that this is industrial district, this is industrial, and this is industrial. So it will be kind of contiguous, so that's recommendation is to approve the rezoning.
Questions?
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion passes. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Agenda item number 18, this is an informational item. This is the Legion Field Stormwater Study report from the consultant who has worked on this, representing Bolton and Mink. And Jason, are you going to introduce this, or Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and
Introduce this.
Council. Bolton and Mink is here to give a presentation on the Legion Field Stormwater Study. If you remember, over the last 3 years, we've had significant and regular flooding in the areas that he's going to talk about. The areas by the concrete plant, the areas along Legion Field Road, the areas along the railroad tracks going east of Legion Field Road, that crosses over into the area that we're developing now for apartment complex. So that's been a potential, or a real issue that we've had over the last few years. So you can go ahead and, Josh, and do your...
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name's Josh Steer. I'm with Bolton and Mink. I'm here to talk about the drainage conditions along Legion Field, west of town here. So we were hired to study the frequent flooding problems and come up with some potential solutions. The key areas of concerns that we identified, Glenn kind of went through them too, but to be a little more specific, were the Kendall Street intersection of Legion Field Road, as well as Paris Road, and then the railroad crossings. This area experiences frequent flooding, for rainfall events as small as 2 inches. So the picture on the left there, I pulled from the local newspaper. That was from September of last year, and I believe that's the backyards of the residents west of Kendall Street, south of the railroad tracks. So there's clearly some issues. So to look at this, study this problem, we developed a computer-based stormwater model. We looked at the design rainfall events, or the 2, 10, and the 100-year are kind of the standard rainfall events. So those correspond to about 2 inches, 4 inches, and about 7 inches in 24 hours. So a 2-year rainfall event has a 50% chance of occurring on any given year. So, on any given year, we can get a 2-inch rainfall in less than 24 hours. So that's what's shown here. This is the existing conditions map based on our analysis. So the light blue is the 2-year extent, kind of the peak flood elevations throughout the whole study area. So to kind of give you a little perspective on, wrong button. So the railroad tracks come through right here. The Buffalo Ridge concrete plant's here, the undeveloped properties up here. So as I was saying, the light blue is the 2-year extent. The darker blue is the 10-year extent, and then the red is the 100-year extent. So you can see south of the railroad tracks, there's significant ponding west of Legion Field Road. There's ponding along south of the railroad tracks. So this is a combination, the highly impervious surface area from the Buffalo Ridge concrete plant overflows, runs overland to this area, and then the storm sewer in this area is relatively undersized for the drainage area it serves. And then the lack of any, stormwater ponds to control that water just exacerbates the issues here. So the other area identified was west of the Buffalo Ridge concrete plant. There's a culvert crossing that drains approximately, I believe it's about 15 acres. Then it's served by an 8-inch tile that runs along the railroad tracks and then connects in with the city storm sewer. The existing culvert size is like a 36-inch, and then the tile is about an 8-inch. So you can about imagine how choked that system is. There's several properties here that are impacted during small rainfall events. It's just not working efficiently.
That's St. Aubyn's property, and I know that you've been contacted by Mr. St. Aubyn before concerning significant flooding up to and including his floors.
Sure. And so one of the goals of the study was to look at ways we can improve drainage in these two areas. Moving north of the tracks on the north end of Legion Field Road, there's the undeveloped property. So to our knowledge, there's about 47 acres that come through to a depression up here, and then it really doesn't have anywhere to go. It's not served by any known storm sewer system. There may be field tile or something out there, but it drains away relatively slow. And so to develop that property, some sort of stormwater management needs to be put in place. As part of our study, we looked at the storm sewer capacity north of the railroad tracks. So the storm sewer on the figure, by the way, is the orange line. So that's the existing storm sewer in place today. We determined that the storm sewer in Legion Field Road north of the tracks is probably adequately sized, but there is potential for property damage for rainfall events that exceed the storm sewer capacity at the Paris Road intersection. So another one of our goals on this study was to how can we provide benefit to that as well. Oh, wrong way. So the goal of this study was to come up with some options to improve drainage out here. We developed 3 separate phases that could be constructed independently in these 3 separate areas or concurrently as one project. Phase 1 is to improve the drainage at the Kendall Street intersection. So we broke it into 2 different alternatives. Alternative A on the left would maintain the existing 24-inch outfall to the Redwood River. To manage stormwater, we would need 2 separate ponds located on each side of Legion Field Road. The one on the west side would be located behind the properties and kind of catch all that water draining off the ready mix plant before it can get to the Kendall Street intersection. And then the basin on the east side of the road is just additional storage due to that undersized existing outfall to the Redwood River. We kind of looked at a second scenario that didn't involve as much excavation. Alternative B on the right would just be the one basin behind there to catch all that runoff from the ready mix plant and then providing a larger outfall to the Redwood River. The larger outfall would require a permit from the Corps of Engineers, but it's certainly something that is constructible. It's in our report, our recommendation would be alternative B on the right, just because there's significantly less excavation costs. So, the larger pipe cost is offset by the excavation savings.
And less disruption of the park.
And you still get your ball fields.
Right.
Kind of moving on from that scenario, phase 2 would be to improve that area west of the ready mix plant. So right now there's an existing culvert that drains, and then this shows that 8-inch tile running along the tracks. So we would kind of abandon that and then convey water to a new stormwater basin that would be located just south of the existing one serving the subdivision. This basin would basically take all that water that's ponding up here and then store it here and then bleed it into this basin. It's slightly oversized relative to most basins, but it's going to not impact the capacity of the downstream system, which all drains to the diversion channel. There would be opportunity with this basin to incorporate some water quality benefits as well that don't currently exist on the watershed. So right now it's just all that industrial stormwater running off and getting into the system. Here we can incorporate some stormwater quality improvements. The phase 3 improvements
Before
are
you leave phase 2,
sure.
would you want to maybe talk about on the area by Buffalo Ridge and west, did you consider the alternative of going straight west to the diversion channel?
We did not. We did not. Glenn, maybe you can provide some insight on. I think it was just kind of initially off the top that would be too
That was the
expensive.
shortest distance to get it to an outfall. We didn't really look going directly west.
I
But we
think-
sure could. I mean,
Sure. I would anticipate, there'd be some easement acquisition that would be required. It wouldn't be probably the easiest solution, but certainly worth investigating.
it'd be another railroad crossing as well.
Correct. Phase 3 improvements are the drainage north of the railroad tracks. So during our initial, when we got going on the study, we made a field visit. We actually found that this culvert crossing just north of the turkey plant was actually about 90% plugged. And so that was obviously contributing to the drainage issues at Kendall Street as well. And so as part of our phase 3 improvements, we recommend putting a new culvert crossing in a similar location and then a open ditch to convey flows north to a new stormwater basin in kind of that existing depressional area. This basin would outlet to the existing storm sewer system and then to the diversion channel. The basin would be designed to kind of manage stormwater from the immediate property between Legion Field Road and then this road here. I don't recall that name, but the other added benefit is by connecting it to the Legion Field storm sewer. During large rainfall events, I spoke about ponding at this low point. It would actually backfeed into this pond, and so the pond would also, serve all the drainage area east of Legion Field Road, but it would also provide benefit to this intersection as well.
Mr. Mayor? Is there enough depth in the storm sewer that would serve the outfall of that? I mean, would that be a permanent pool, or would it be a dry basin?
It would have to be a dry basin based on the proximity to the airport.
Okay.
The FFA has a regulation that you have to have dry stormwater ponds within 10,000 feet of any jet-capable airport.
So we have there's enough depth to the invert of the existing sewer that we can have a substantial pond and still on a dry basin?
Correct.
Okay.
It's about 10 to 12 feet down.
Okay.
So we went out on our site visit, we field verified that.
And the yellow area would be the continued development area for that site.
So, and we actually have the elevation on there, it's about 49. I want to say the ground elevation there is about 60, so it's about 10 feet down. So, and it's a 54-inch, so it has substantial capacity.
How many acre feet is that pond proposed to be at max height or max depth?
About 20, so
Okay.
it's a substantial volume.
So we're talking 36 acre feet just in those two?
Correct. Moving on. So we put some estimated costs to each of these phases. So as I said, they could be constructed independently or as one project, depending on how the council sees fit. They come in at about $500,000 each. That does not include any sort of temporary or permanent easement acquisition. A lot of the cost ends up being just excavation to dig the ponds.
And phase 3, is the basin that's behind the houses, not on the park? That's your recommendation,
Phase one would be the basin behind the houses by the ready mix plant.
No, I'm talking on Legion Field, or Legion Park.
Oh.
You had two recommendations there.
Correct. So back to the phase one, the recommended option would be the single basin.
Okay, thank you.
So I probably went through that. There's a lot of technical information there, but I would certainly be happy to answer any additional questions.
John?
Okay, in the view that you have, the present view with the 100-year flood, which comes up and hits a number of the homes
Yep.
along in that area.
Yep.
Now, is there feasible to get an updated map on that with all these improvements? What would that, are we going to start still infringing on homes in that area, or is that going to be basically all that water moved away?
These improvements would provide a substantial improvement to flooding for up to the 7-inch 100-year rainfall event. So the majority of this would go away. So that's why we don't include that typically in our reports, just because there's nothing to really show, because it goes away more or less.
All right, so just making sure if
Yep.
we do this, it would keep it away from the homes.
Yep.
Out in that area, or should anyway. So.
Maybe one comment that we had too, the existing pipe that goes through the railroad now, we talked about the possibility of either cleaning it out and using it, and the railroad said no. They were afraid that any disturbance to the dirt and the pipe itself may collapse the pipe. So they said they did not want us to maintain the existing pipe, put in a new one.
Is that a legacy? Is that part of the original legacy plumbing that when the rail bed was laid?
It's as old as we could find records. I mean, it just filled in over time. We went out there the other day and took a look at it. There was about this much water coming through the very top of that pipe. And it's a what size?
48.
48
You're
inch
saying there
pipe.
is a chance.
There's a chance. So it would really help alleviate the water pressure from the east side to the west side for the railroad as well.
Correct. And maybe one thing I didn't quite point out is, back to the phase three, as part of our recommendations, we're recommending kind of improving this ditch. Right now, it's heavily vegetated, so you'd clean that out to kind of improve conveyance along these backyards to get it down to this proposed stormwater system.
That was a question probably for Glenn. Is it Peltier Street?
That's the one. That's the clean out of that whole side of the railroad that's at the end of Peltier Street, and
That would take care of that
Mr.
issue.
DeVries, that would take care of the drainage off the end. The street itself is another issue, but the drainage off the end would be taken care of by this project. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we had them specifically do this in a three-phase approach, identifying the areas that were most critical to us to accomplish first, second, third, and also whether or not the timing for acquisition of property or right-of-way for the ponding on the site owned by the concrete company. Now, hopefully, the concrete company will see a real benefit by allowing that pond to be put in there and not be an expensive acquisition. But if it is, we maybe just bypass it for now. But that was a real significant regular flooding issue. And the runoff coming off the concrete plant isn't pristine. I'll just leave it at that. But so there are some real community benefits in these three proposals. That's all.
Mr. Mayor.
Greg?
Glenn, in your conversation with the railroad on the phase three and the improvement or replacement of that culvert, I know until we've got it in writing and all the permits are in place, it's hard to know for sure, but what kind of a feel did you get for them on how agreeable they would be and how much of a railroad speed fast track we could get on that?
They were very interested in working with us.
Yeah.
Our conversation has been generally with the roadmaster, real nice to work with and agreeable and supportive and all those kinds of good vibes. Now, the timing going through their main office might be a little bit slow, and that's why we didn't want to hold up all the improvements by those types of things.
So the top of the invert of that, would you say 45-inch pipe under the railroad is,
Yep.
how much distance, or is there a lot between the top of that pipe and like their ties? That's not a real highly elevated rail, is it?
There's probably 2 to 3 feet
Oh,
between
yeah.
them.
It's a good 2-3 feet down from the top of the rail to what's draining now. We were out there the other day looking at another drainage issue just on the west side of it, and it's not close to the ties.
Okay. That might, I mean, if it's close, it's a compelling factor. A number of the Class 1s have had some trestle failures this year causing some significant derailments, and,
We'd have to do jacking of a pipe through
Sure,
there,
okay.
for sure.
all right.
Other questions? Glenn?
I assume that this goes back to staff, and staff will come forward with recommendations as to what to do and when to do it.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of timeline as to when you think this will all be done as far as staff work?
I don't see a construction occurring till next year, but I would expect by next year we should have plans and specs ready by late fall, winter, for a portion of it. We need to do, now that we've got the report, we need to do some PR and discussions with the property owners in the area. Even the Parks Department, we've had some discussions, but not recommendations. So it's going to take some time.
Thank you.
And good point, Glenn. To Glenn's point, we appreciate your report, great report. Now I'll go back to the staff. The recommendation on what is moving forward and what phase and what timing, and how financing will happen and paying, we'll look forward to that. There is a sense of urgency, on all of these people that are properties are personally affected by that too. So we would like to move forward, not
Yep.
put this report on the shelf. So, Sharon?
Yep, Mr. Mayor and Council, just on the financing part, and we haven't figured that out, but likelihood or potential that stormwater fee reserves and current stormwater fee revenue would pay for a portion of or majority of this particular work.
We would hope so, because we've had significant discussion about how to pay for it. And some of the areas we're talking about have never been assessed for any stormwater project. There's no pipe, there's no ponds, there's no anything. And whether or not there should be an area assessment. Well, they're kind of getting an area assessment currently for stormwater runoff. So we want to make sure that we make this as harmless as possible, still making sure that everybody pays their fair share. So
Is there anything mitigation FEMA open from the last year, from the 2018 floods?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That mitigation is always something that can be applied for through the Corps. Yeah, or the state. So we've got some numbers now that at least talk about areas to talk about. This is a kind of an important one here too, because there's a lot of flooding and ponding in and around the new development site that's going out there. Not just on their property, but the adjacent properties. And what this helped us to do is identify an area that we probably shouldn't have for sale. The yellow part, we should still have for sale, but not the blue part.
Right.
And so that helps us to identify what's left of the site. And the other one over in Parkway 2, that was, we tried to keep it away from the existing and developing lots. And there are some developed lots right adjacent to it. Well, and it does help for this to be a dry pond as well. We don't intend to fence it. We do intend to have it sloped well enough to be, I'll call it kid-friendly, but it is the only area that we could identify that could be used for that stormwater detention from St. Albans.
And that would still preserve the berm.
Still preserve the berm. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, other questions for either
I have a
Josh?
question, Glenn, just because, and you made reference to that new development out there. Would it make sense to do phase 3 before phase
Yeah,
1?
it might,
You know,
it might.
Because again,
Yeah,
Got the land already.
you've got the land, and
we
you've
the
got
land
everything there,
already,
and
and that would take a whole,
that might help
big
alleviate
area.
a lot of
Oh.
problems
Yeah.
that might change what you do on phase 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Might,
yep.
right? Okay.
Other questions?
We do appreciate their work very much. This has been a nagging thing for us for several years, and I think what they came back to us with was a real workable, and yes, it's expensive, but we'll see what our dirt prices are too when we get to them.
Floods are expensive too.
They are.
That's right.
Well, in our
Expensive to
history
fix a
with
house.
stormwater management, specifically with Bolton and Mink, they were the designer of the Ditch 62 solution.
Yep.
It included a pond that had 400,000 cubic feet of soil removed and eliminated an open ditch and didn't contribute to downstream
Really?
flow any more than in the current conditions. And that project worked extremely well.
Yeah.
And it was in 1994 that work was done.
Yeah. And we've had significant events since then.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on then to agenda item number 19, 2018 Marshall Area Economic Development Authority Annual Report with us tonight is Tara Anken.
Perfect, good job, listen. Nice haircuts, by the way, on this end of the
Thanks, yeah, we work hard at it. They're just one. Take one.
Thank you.
Take one, pass it along.
I got electronic. I already got one.
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me come and share some exciting things that have happened over 2018. First of all, before I jump into some of the reports, I just want to share that this report I use a lot every year when I meet with business owners that are looking to perhaps expand, or even if it's a new lead to locate here. This is an invaluable tool that we get so much good feedback on. One of the comments that I got when I was showing a developer this was that, wow, I usually have to go to 20 websites to find information on any community, and you guys have it all in one spot. So the feedback has really been eye-opening and really great. So just wanted to share that with you guys. I won't touch on every page because there's a lot of data in here and we could spend many hours on this alone, but I will hit some of the high points. And in addition, I did give a cheat sheet information of some of the trends there. It doesn't hit all of the fun stuff, but it's a start. So I'll kind of just page through. Starting on page 3, the president of the EDA, Greg Booker, gave a nice message, and on the bottom of it, I just wanted to call out the last sentence. Our progress is the result of the efforts of many and provides opportunities for many, making Marshall a stronger as a regional leader. And so thank you to all who have contributed to the growth and success of Marshall, and that includes you all sitting here, mayor, council members, EDA, and citizens of the community. Really, it takes all of us to drive economic development forward. And so for that, thank you for a great 2018. I'll skip ahead to page 7. That starts our business development section. There's been a number of things going on in Marshall last year. First of all, as you guys are all familiar with the Merit Center, Avera, and the ACMC acquisition, Furniture Mart USA with the redevelopment of the former Kmart building, and then Unique Opportunities, which we all are aware of the development happening out at Parkway 3. And this is not an all-inclusive list. I mean, we try to catch everything as we know it, but try to include as much as we can. On page 8, we mentioned the upcoming Marshall Area Public Archery Range. We feel that that's going to be a great asset to the community once it gets up and running. And then you can see a couple of the other Menards, Grace Life Church, Aldi, the new Edward Jones building with the 2 rental suites there. So a lot of activity along East College Drive and our other main business areas. On page 9, I'll just point out a couple of things. The Red Baron was used or formally booked over, well, about 3,500 hours in 2018, which is kind of a fun data fact. And then I wanted to point out the bicycle-friendly community. Marshall was designated with the bronze level bicycle-friendly community, which was something that I think the community was working on for a while. So to finally get that designation it's a really big deal. So should be proud of that. Again, I won't touch on everything. I'll skip forward to page 13 or 12 and 13. Our building permit activity from 2017 to 2018 increased significantly on the commercial side and also the residential side. So we did see that increase from 2017 to 2018. And I also asked Ilya earlier this week, our year-to-date is up from 2018 year-to-date to 2019 year-to-date is actually up over last year. So that's really good indications of a growing or strong building permit activity. Then I'll skip forward to page 16. Talks a little bit here about our food and beverage tax, which I wanted to point out that has increased slowly but steadily each year since 2013, which to me, that's kind of when the Red Baron Arena was built, so there could be some potential tie-ins. That's not the only reason, but I think that could be one of the factors driving that. Our lodging tax, as you can see, has remained fairly stagnant. Try to figure out what's kind of driving those trends. Some of it might be missed payments or missed opportunities, but there's room for growth there. So as our food and beverage taxes increased, you would think our lodging tax would increase as well, but it has not. So just looking at underlying effects of what's driving those numbers. On page 18 and 19, on page 19 mentions our pull factor. And that's one thing that we monitor from year to year. You can see it compares Marshall with other regional communities such as Redwood Falls, Wilmer, and Worthington. And the trend for all of the communities have been slightly down from the years previous, but we still have a very strong pull factor of 1.56. Alexandria is about the highest in the state with a pull factor close to 2. So just for a point of reference, you know, everybody that lives in Marshall buys something in Marshall, that would be a pull factor of 1. We're not gaining anything, but we're not losing anything. So to have a pull factor of 1.56 is really strong for those developers or site selectors that are looking at numbers such as this. On the next page, on page 21, I'll touch real quickly on the population trends. The white percentage, if you look under the city of Marshall or Marshall, Minnesota column, down to the percentage of total, our white population is falling a little bit, so what that tells us is that our population is changing, we're becoming more diversified, and our median age has remained steady at 31.6, which is a relatively young community average for a regional hub, so I think that is pretty neat. One thing that I wanted to point out on the bottom right of page 21 is that it looks like we lost about 450 people in that age 18 to 34, and these are estimates from 2016. That's the most recent data we have. So my question is, how do we get more of those people to come back, or how do we help them stay here? What are they looking for? So kind of diving into that in the next coming years would be a good question to ask. But then if you look up in the age cohort of 35 to 44, you can see that we're gaining. So that we do have some moving back, but let's get more moving back or more to stay in the first place. I will jump ahead to page 29 or 28. Page 28 talks about our major employers. There's been a couple of different acquisitions or mergers. So in 2017, we had 20 at 100. This year, we have 17, and part of that is because ACMC and Avera combined, so that was one. Mid-Continent Cabinetry was another one that we considered a part of the Marshall area. So now we're at 17, but of those 17, I consider ourselves very well diversified. across many different business sectors, whether it's education, healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing. So we don't really have all of our eggs in one basket, which is a really good thing from a community attraction standpoint. On page 29, it talks about our commuting patterns, and so I think some of that's interesting. You can feel free to look through that at your leisure. I'll skip forward to page 32. This page talks a little bit about our public schools, and in the text at the top of the page, it talks about over the last 7 years, our school districts have seen a 15.5% increase, which is a good thing because that points to a growing community or growing families. And then on the bottom of the page, it also talks about the enrollment projections. So it's a good problem to have, but as we know, the school referendum's coming up, so I'd encourage anybody to check out the website. Our EDA board did just vote in approval of the referendum, so wanted to share that with you folks if you haven't read that in the paper. On page 35, 34 and 35, we get into housing, which has been a huge topic in 2018 with Broadmoor Valley, the Sunrise Court, the Herzog projects out at Parkway, and then our UCAP homes out in Parkway too. So a lot of movement in the housing, and then there's been also single family and spec homes as well. But housing is a huge retention and recruitment tool. So I can't tell you how many hours that John and I or Sharon and I, we've talked about housing and how it affects our whole economic development role in Marshall, especially when we have shovel-ready land out in the industrial park. If we've got somebody bringing in 50 jobs, 100 jobs, where are we housing in them? So housing is definitely a piece to the puzzle, and it's been a big piece of it, especially in 2018 with a number of those projects going on. On page 38, we're getting on the home stretch, so bear with me. Commerce Park, I just really wanted to talk about that. That is a huge asset that we have in our community, and that's almost done and almost certified as shovel-ready. So hopefully the next time I'm here, we can share that shovel-ready certification. We have been marketing that very aggressively on different platforms, whether that's social media, print advertising, website advertising. So we're advertising that as shovel-ready, and it's also in an opportunity zone, which gives us a leg up over some other communities that may not have that. So I just wanted to point that out as well. We have been working with some leads, potentially very early in the game on some of them, but it's nice to know that we have interest, and it's nice to know that we're getting views and inquiries from our online marketing plan. Does anybody have any questions?
Just a comment. You mentioned before about the food and beverage tax going up from 2013 to 14.
Yep.
And, you know, it could be due to a number of factors. One is more activity, more people eating out, but
Yep.
that was also the time when the rate was increased. And so,
From 13 to 14,
right,
yes. But
that was
it-
about the time. So part of that
Yep.
due, not necessarily the activity, but because of the increase in the rate.
Yep, from the 2013 to 2014. But
Right.
then from 14 to 18, it has increased every year without the rate
Right,
increase.
that would be due to activity, yes.
Yep.
But that kind of explains why 13
The
went
jump.
up so much to 14, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Tara.
Yeah.
Appreciate this.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to work on these projects, and I look forward to a more exciting 2019. So thank you.
Move forward then with the agenda item number 20. This is to consider the annual adoption of the resolution declaring Sounds of Summer as a community festival. Are there any questions about this resolution? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Jim, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. We will close the voting, and the motion does pass. Craig, were you going to vote, or? Okay.
Now I'm in.
Then we'll move then to agenda item number 21, calling the action requested would be calling for a public hearing on the private use of public streets and parking lot for Sounds of Summer. The event is scheduled for August 16th to 18th, 2019. Questions about this?
I move to call for the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? We do have a couple representatives from Sounds of Summer. If you wanted to speak, you could, or you could speak.
Mayor, I think we probably need to address that. We have some changing of the guard because Mr. Levat is now a council person, so Brock Clayton, my son, is now the president of the Marshall Festival. So Russ and I will still be around, but I think, what did you say, Russ? They're pushing us out, so. But
The only way I
again,
could get off is
That's
I
a
had to
good
come
thing.
on the
that's a
council.
good thing. But again, we'd like to thank the council's support and for this continued event. Is it our 11th year? 11th year, so it's still going strong, so.
Yeah, well, thank you for the past work, and we look forward to the future work, so thank
Good.
you.
You remember, Mark, median age is 30.4 in Marshall, so it's,
Brock, you've got big shoes to fill.
Yeah. So I would entertain a motion on the calling for, or do we have that?
So we did.
We
We
did.
have that. So
Wait for
any
the
other
vote.
discussion
Vote.
on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. And the motion does pass. We'll move then to agenda item number 22, consider the approval of the letter of support for the Marshall Cemetery Association. So, I'm not sure, Sharon, if you have this to introduce, or otherwise we'll turn it right over to the Cemetery Association.
We did have a request from the Cemetery Association to discuss some proposed legislation and a request to ask for support in promoting and having the legislation passed. And so representatives are here to explain a little bit more about that. And as well, the city assessor is here if you had any of those specific tax assessment questions.
Well, we're happy to welcome you here, and we're also happy that maybe we're on the road to a solution to a long-standing problem, so.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, my name is Paul Bridgeland. I'm the current president of the Cemetery Association. This is Lyle Mosing. He is the secretary. Up until about 2 weeks ago, he was the treasurer as well. We just elected a new treasurer. I know some of you are real familiar with what we've been struggling with, and I won't take up too much of your time other than this legislation that's before the Minnesota House with a companion bill in the Minnesota Senate. Basically, it makes land that's farmed, owned by either a school, a public hospital, and a cemetery, one of those three, public hospital, house of worship, or cemetery. And if they use the land, the proceeds from the land strictly to support the activities of that entity, it's tax exempt. That would take what land we have still in cropland, which is will be about 15 acres after this spring, off the tax rolls. And basically the situation we've had the last few years is we've been tax collectors for you guys, because nearly everything we get in income off that land has gone to property taxes for this city and that. I think you had a copy of a letter that identifies the legislation. I left that with the administrator earlier, and we just asked that you support us. So if you have any specific questions, we'd be glad to entertain them. Okay.
Questions, Glenn?
I support what you're doing. I think it's a good idea, and evidently legislation is the way to take care of this problem. I guess my concern is I'm wondering if the wording of the statute's too broad. I wonder if they need to tighten up the wording, because it might have unintended consequences the way it's worded. And I'm just thinking of different examples. For one thing, it says proceeds from the sale of products. So does that cover when you lease the product, or lease the land to somebody else? Or do you have to only be the one that sells the product?
We're not sure exactly how that'll be interpreted. The way we've been operating in the past is we basically cash rented the cropland.
Right.
We've discussed it amongst the board members, and our basic reaction to that very concern is, if it says we have to basically do the work ourselves, then we, instead of just renting the cropland, we'd probably go on a custom farming basis where we.
Share crop?
Yeah,
type
share
thing.
crop or custom farm it where they, you know, so we're prepared to adjust the way we've been doing it to what the law will require at that point.
And I know that, I think you bought the land for expansion purposes, so if the cemetery expands, you'll have additional space, or?
Well, not entirely. The cemetery was first established in 1871. Actually, it predates the city of Marshall. And in 1897, Lake Marshall Township, which was operating it, decided they didn't want to anymore. So at that point, they basically created the nonprofit association that has existed ever since. And at that time, they deeded 40 acres, which is the main portion of the cemetery. And that's where the cropland is located. In the 1930s, and I can't give you the exact date, we added a strip of land of about 7 acres between the south border of that 40 and Birch Street. And that's where we're expanding now. That's where this year we're taking another acre out of that. And what's left in that area is going to be seeded down to a mixture of grasses and stuff, and maintained as a buffer the way the areas in front where the main entrance is. So the only cropland would be on the north side along Fairview Street, and that's part of the original cemetery. It's been cropped literally since probably 1870, but 1897 for sure. And the proceeds used to support the cemetery.
And I think in the wording, it covers public hospitals, but not necessarily private hospitals.
That's my understanding. I gave you a copy of the actual language, and it says, it names 3 entities and refers to them from somewhere else in the tax code. And the interpretation I was given from the analysis of it was that's what the 3 entities were.
And I guess I was wondering why it would just be public hospitals and private cemeteries, why not private hospitals, like Avera is a private hospital, and
It's exempt already.
from tax, for real estate tax too? Okay. Well, that's interesting. Anyway, I'm thinking of an example where, so if you donated a farm to a church or a cemetery, 160 acres or whatever, and if they sharecropped it, then that land would be tax exempt then too, then, right?
I think it would, I'm no lawyer, and I actually didn't write the proposed statutes. I just know about them, and I know as they're written, they appear to solve our problem. But I'm assuming that the land would have to be deeded to the cemetery.
Right.
And it would have to be, I don't think it could be a private for-profit cemetery. I think that would change it if it was a private for-profit cemetery. We're not a for-profit cemetery. But then it's very possible that the land would no longer be subject to property taxes.
Right. And I know in Fairmont, there was a farmer that donated his farmland to the church. And so the church for a number of years had that farmland that they used, and used the profits from it to support their missions and so forth. And so
I would assume under those circumstances that would qualify for an exemption.
Right, and I guess I'm wondering, is that your intent, that that's the type of situation where you'd want the real estate taxes to be exempt?
In all fairness, that's probably not
Right.
your issue. by
Yeah,
any
it
means.
really
You're-
isn't, because we're looking to solve our problem, and
Right.
this legislation looks to solve our problem.
You guys didn't draft this legislation.
We did not draft the
You're
legislation.
a
In fact,
passenger on the bus.
We're passenger on the bus. We did contact both Senator Doms and Representative Swedinsky a number of years ago on this issue, and it really didn't go anywhere at that time. And then we were just recently informed that somebody else had, and it's in the works, and if it would really make a huge difference for us.
Well, and I think, we've had discussion over the years about
Yeah.
your issue, and I think for a number of years, you've said, probably the solution is legislation, and now you do have some legislation, and there is all these details, but that's what the House of Representatives and the Senate need to hash out. That's
Right.
But
our-
I will
our-
say this, I did look on online on the state legislature websites and that. And the tax committees that are looking at this, they did an analysis of the impact of this legislation statewide. And the determination was it was negligible. It wasn't going to create a big negative impact tax-wise or a big positive impact. Obviously it wouldn't, but that was basically a negligible result.
The one thing that we haven't done yet, we're just kind of waiting for the council's direction, but we easily could do is our lobbyists at the League of Minnesota Cities could help us support this legislation too and do some key contacts with legislature.
That would be fantastic.
And in addition, for some of the language, we can get clarification for Councilmember Bearcoller on some of those impacts. The other association, which probably wouldn't take a position but would be helpful in some of the analysis, is the Minnesota Association of Assessors. I don't probably have your correct association term, but I know they do a lot of work as well when legislation is proposed. But if the council does want to move forward, we would contact our lobbyist at the league, and we also could use Flaherty and Hood, who's another provider of lobbying for us, and have them help us to help you.
That would be really, really great. We did meet with the county commissioners last week, and they did pass a resolution, and they are going to send a letter in support of this legislation.
And the only reason I'm bringing this up at this meeting to you guys is because I was assuming you're kind of the driving force behind this, and you've been working with the legislators, and so I thought maybe you could be talking to them and say, maybe there's some things that need to be changed. And
we're kind of on the periphery. We're hoping,
Okay.
and we have sent letters to the tax committees, but we did not initiate it.
Okay.
It wasn't initiated in the legislature for our benefit.
Right.
We just know about it, and
Okay.
if it'll work for us. It'll help us
And-
tremendously.
because I know you've been dealing with this for years, so I thought maybe you guys
We've been looking for
were.
a solution, and we
And-
finally think this is one
Right.
that.
And if you were the driving force behind it, I thought you would talk to legislators and say,
Then I would
maybe
definitely
we
know
need
more
to
about
tighten this
that,
up a little bit.
but
So,
we're not, so.
Yeah, well, I didn't have that
Yeah,
understanding.
and I appreciate
so,
your
Yeah, but I do
question.
think that maybe they should really examine it closely, because sometimes there are unintended consequences. And in your case, it's something that should happen, and you should have the law changed to benefit you and to help you out as far as the work that you do. So if you do talk to them, I do think there's some concerns here.
There's a little glitch in Minnesota law that makes a distinction, and it's been there for, I don't know how long, decades at least, that makes a distinction between what's referred to as large urban cemeteries and small rural cemeteries. And we definitely meet the definition of a small rural cemetery, because a small rural is defined as one that's located in a county that does not have a city of more than 30,000 population, and it's in less than 100 acres, and we're definitely under both of those. So,
Okay.
Based on, there's an ongoing issue, this has the potential of resolving that issue, I think we should support this.
Yeah,
I move to support.
Second.
Motion by Steve.
It's unanimous.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion?
Does that include sending, or get the League of Minnesota Cities and everything else involved? Okay.
Other discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. Motion passes. Thank you,
Good luck.
Paul.
thank you all
Thank you.
very, very much for your time.
We'll move then to agenda item number 23, the Commerce Industrial Park Second Edition, the dedication of the public roadway and utility easements. Earlier this evening, the Housing Redevelopment Authority acted on this same thing, made this recommendation to the council. Does the council have questions, or Dennis, anything additional you would want to add?
Nothing else.
It's a minor housekeeping thing to revise the plot lines to include the corners of intersections.
I move the revision.
I'll second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting. Motion passes. Glenn, were you
Yeah, I thought I did, but I didn't. That's okay.
going to reopen it, or
Yeah, reopen, I guess, yeah.
we'll revote?
Sorry.
Close the voting. And the motion passes. So now we'll move on then to Commission Board Liaison Reports. From my part, the Southwest Regional Development Commission they've had 2 canceled meetings, but they did have because of weather, but they did have their board retreat was held 2 days last week. I attended that. It was a strategic planning session. It was facilitated by Cheryl Glazier. Some of you might remember her when she worked with the Southwest Minnesota Foundation, and now she's a nationally known facilitator. So it was an excellent session. Also, the Fire Relief Association did have their quarterly meeting this past Tuesday. The fund is performing quite well, and in the past last year there was a kind of a bubble of retirements. We don't see that happening this year, but when you have that number of retirements and that payout, which is the purpose of the fund, that impacts the amount of funds that are in that fund. So so there's some recovery from that, but it's well managed, it's performing well. With that, Craig?
I have nothing, Mayor.
I was unable to attend the EDA because I was on vacation, and Community Services Advisory Board and Cable Commission have not met.
Glenn?
Planning Commission items were acted on tonight.
John?
Well, the EDA, we had the report from Tara this evening, and I think that pretty well covered most of the meeting anyway. As far as the utilities, the utility board may still be meeting at this time, not really sure, but thank you for those of you who were able to attend the earlier session where review of the audit. Just a couple of things to bring forward. There was pointed out in the audit, there was $2.39 million in savings of the cost of power this past year. And pretty much all of that goes to directly back to the community because we are a municipal utility and not an investor-owned. And in comparison, if look at the most recent numbers available, which is 2017 numbers, the difference between a Marshall being a municipal-owned utility or a investor-owned utility using the APPA estimates, which are estimates but reasonably accurate, amounts to a $6.6 million savings to the community just in having our own utility here. So the value of public power. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Russ?
CVB will meet tomorrow morning. They've been having some issues with finding an appropriate time for everybody to get together. Police Advisory Committee has met and conducted interviews for the captains, and they will be meeting shortly, I believe, next week on conducting interviews for the sergeant position. So that's it.
And Jim?
Transit Committee met last week. I was unable to attend. The other was out.
Okay, thank you. Move then to council member individual items. Craig, this is you're in.
Okay, thanks. A couple things. Appreciate our Public Works folks have been working a lot with some of the current and kind of nagging drainage issues out in the Fairgrounds Road area. You know, there's been some problems with some tile and then of course our big mountain, snow mountain out there. I know Dean and the Parks Department both have been working to try to alleviate that. It's causing a lot of problems on 2 or 3 holes on the country club, 14, 15, and 16. So appreciate that. And then Jim and I have talked a number of times about the property, and I'll first one in the state gets to complain about it, but the property that we're looking at purchasing for the clear approachways, that building is taking itself down. So, you know, to our legal counsel and to our engineering, just to kind of mention that in the negotiations, that it might behoove them to have a better plan, and a purchase agreement signed might help stave off some problems that they're going to have from the city for blight on property and possibly a public nuisance and a threat to public safety. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Glenn?
I have nothing.
Jim?
Craig covered what I was going to cover, and like I said a couple weeks ago, the snow is becoming a distant memory. I do still want to commend our public works in moving all the snow.
Get some in my yard, I'll still show you.
I have none in my yard. Mine is gone.
And Russ?
I don't know who did it, but whether it be Glenn or Public Safety, whoever took care of the parking issue on Greeley and First Street, it's wonderful. I mean,
Property owner was very good to work with.
and lastly, I had the opportunity to ride along with our building department inspector a week, 10 days ago, and it was an eye-opening experience for me, and one of the properties that he took me into was the old Trident location. You will not believe what they're doing there. It's unbelievable. It's, yeah, if you get an opportunity and you want to see some real progress of that building, it's unbelievable. My mouth just dropped, so, yeah. And I think they're still shooting to have it done by August. I don't know how they're going to do it, but, because they're going to re-roof and everything else, they've got a pretty aggressive plan to get those buildings done. So, that's it.
And John?
Just one little item that more for us than anything else, you know, and it happens every once in a while, we go to vote and somebody's vote doesn't show up, and Glenn's happened to a couple of you. If you accidentally double-click that refresh, you know, you click it to submit, and if you hit another exit or another button in there, it cancels your vote. So be a little cautious on not hitting it either too hard, and sometimes the buttons have a little bounce to them, but just kind of a point out that, you know, just maybe take care of this to try and hit it once, because it's happened to Glenn a couple of times, but it pretty much happened to all of us at various times. So I think that may be part of our issue as well, is just a simple switch bounce there will cancel your vote out. So.
Well, thank you, John, for that tip. So we'll move on then to staff reports. Sharon?
Mr. Mayor and Council, on Thursday, April 16th, the city did open bids for our wastewater treatment facility improvements, and the bids were all competitive and very closely aligned. However, they were over the engineer's estimate, and staff, along with our engineer, is going to look at those bids. They may go back to some of the specifications and look at a way to reduce the price, and we're talking $1.2 million over the estimate, so there's some worthy consideration of possibly reconsidering the specifications in order to possibly lower those biddings, and so there may be a possible rebidding situation. Again, the staff will, I think, are meeting tomorrow to discuss that. Two other really brief items. I do want to also talk a little bit about the golf course and Fairground Road, ponding on the east side, but also hole number 14. And you're not able to use the back nine because of the hole 14. But today, Dean Kudrin actually called the former superintendent, not the last one, but the one before, and found a drain tile or a drainage area that was actually plugged. And we believe that likely by tomorrow that the hole number 14 will be clear of water. So, and I know that just because I saw the current superintendent out there today, and he had expressed concerns to me. So just an update on that. And then I know that the council did receive tonight a letter from Frankie's Vending, and I didn't know if the council had direction on that. I assume since the license was just approved that you didn't want to consider their letter, but maybe in a response to Frankie's, I think the city clerk and I have mentioned that we do kind of want to look at some of these transient merchant license categories, and maybe in the future there's a way to kind of make something work, but I didn't know if you wanted to give kind of direction on that, or if you had a response on their specific letter.
That was my question too, when we were acting on that, and I was wondering, in the past, have we prorated, you know, and we want to continue to be consistent in how we do it. If we're going to prorate for some, we should prorate for all of them, and so maybe it's something we need to look at. Yeah.
On the whole food issue, food truck, does that belong in a transient merchant license, or is that going to be a separate category, I think?
Well,
That's the other question.
And I guess my question comes back to Frankie's, because obviously they laid out the two fee structures and then came with a proposed fee that they would prefer, and I'm not sure what they're basing that on. Did they give you background on what they're basing that on?
John?
I guess honestly, when I looked at the agenda, looking at the recommendation that was in the consent agenda, that already included the prorating. So I think, in my mind, I voted on it as a prorated amount.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so, yeah, I took that as part of that was the recommendation, and the letter just supplemented that, so that knowingly went into that, knowing it was a pre-rated amount, so. And I do believe we have pre-rated other transient merchants in the past, so.
That is correct.
But the prorate then would be $236.25, not $210.
I did not do the math, so.
When was their license approved, for April 1st or May 1st? I think that's what the letter says
In
May.
operation, May 1.
May 1st to December 31st.
Oh,
Math.
I
It's math there.
stand corrected, because I went from April 1st, or May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December is 8, yeah. So I reran the math here, and it is 210, I apologize. I must have miscued on my calculator. Fat fingered.
I double-checked several times.
Yeah, so I apologize. I apologize, I did not mean to get your stress level
Yeah.
up. There's no call about the baby yet, you can
Yeah,
relax.
the stress level is already up, so.
Sorry about that, Kyle, this is
They
not.
paid $210, correct?
Mayor and council, they actually paid $315, so we would be sending them a reimbursement check.
Could I'm just curious here, I'm looking at the agenda, and the agenda talks about 315. Now, the letter was a separate item sent,
Sent prior to the meeting to all council members, and then it was included in a hard copy.
right, and
prior
it was,
to the meeting.
I guess I viewed that as a proposal by the person requesting a change. But when I look at the agenda, it says 315, so I just maybe wasn't clear on exactly what's all happening here.
Yep, so there was discussions with the, and since this was already acted on, there was discussions with the applicant to prorate the fee prior to the meeting. They hadn't provided that letter to me by the posting of the agenda, so that was given to me this afternoon and emailed to council. And then the updated language is on the current agenda. It may not be in front of you because these were uploaded. It's a timing issue, but the
Okay.
accurate information, what was voted on, will be what the public sees online.
Okay, thank you, Kyle.
And what was acted on this
Okay,
evening.
that was confusing to me because at first I thought that the letter was just a suggestion that they were putting forth and that this was the main thing, so anyway.
Anything else, Sharon?
Mr. Mayor and council, I was confused as well, and I'm glad we have the clarification on that particular item, and that's all I had. Thank
But
you.
it will be something we should probably look at
I
then.
think so.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to start with, I'm not normally very crabby. I'm usually pretty upbeat sort of guy. But we had, but we had, over the last 2-3 years, issues with stormwater runoff. And that's because of lots of rain, lots of snow, lots of melt, lots of rain with our snow. But I don't think we understand what we're doing when we do a few things. And I want to talk about, when we go from 3.5 million gallons a day at the wastewater plant to over 11 million gallons a day, we just talk about that. It's a few million gallons over. Quite a bit over, but it's like 7.5 million. That doesn't really resonate with the customers very well. And we calculated that $7.5 million gallons is 1,500 semi-loads of water being delivered to the wastewater plant that day, lined up from here to Taunton. So that maybe brings it to a little bit different thought process. 1,500 semi-loads of water being delivered to the wastewater plant that day for them to treat. Okay? That's really unacceptable, illicit discharges. And we had to take some pictures of some areas. We're not identifying them here. But when people prop open the sanitary sewer manholes to drain their water in their yards, that's intentional. Now, we talk to a lot of people who say, well, geez, Glenn, what was I supposed to do? Let my home flood? No, but there's other alternatives. You can get pumps out there. You can call us and we can have a discussion about what you could do to alleviate some of the stormwater in your backyard where the sanitary sewers exist. We also had significant unacceptable stormwater discharge from Broadmoor Valley. That's normal, though. I mean, that's normal because the discharge comes down into the open sanitary sewer pipes that we have in the past capped ourselves on private property, and they're opened up again. I'm just using some examples of what really is wrong. We also have a lot of sump pumps that we know are being discharged into the sanitary sewer. Of course, those people who come in and get permits, those are discontinued on April 1st, and they're not there anymore. But when you see house after house after house with a pipe coming from the house to the street, and then there's two missing. They don't have sump pumps in their basements. They do have sump pumps in their basements, and they're discharging to the sanitary sewer. So those things are not only illicit discharges, that's what contributes to sewage backup in your neighbor's house or in somebody else's house down the line. You can get rid of it from your yard and send it right down the line to come up in somebody else's basement. So these things I want to bring to the attention of the public, that if you do have situations like that, that you would like us to assist you in taking care of. We understand that there's some things that we can't do anything about. Like some of our subdivisions had tile lines put in around the house and direct connected to the sanitary sewer. Well, what are we going to do with that? Dig up your whole yard and reconnect that to some storm sewer? No, there's some things that we can't feasibly, realistically do. But there are a lot of things that we can do. 1,500 semi-loads of water going to the wastewater plant for us to treat and you to pay for is not acceptable. If we could reduce that by half, it'd be great. We were right on the verge of discharging untreated sewage to the river. And just by the way they managed things that day, they didn't have to. We were ready to do that. We were going to call the duty officer and all that sort of stuff. But I'll get off my high horse here, but it is significant, and we're asking for the public's help in solving some of this. This won't be the last time it happens, and we just like to do better. That's all.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just to support what Glenn's saying. Glenn, I believe when the young man was here talking about the storm water study to alleviate some of the other problems we're having in town, we confirmed the two temporary, the dry pool storm ponds that are proposed to be engineered, and I think we talked about 36 acre feet.
Yes.
How many million gallons a day did you say we were over design capacity at the wastewater plant?
Well, over normal operating 7.5 million.
Per day?
Per day.
Number of days?
Yes, for 3 days.
The volume that those proposed ponds would hold, and knowing the solution that those put, that's 11.7 million gallons for those storm ponds, okay? So think about the significance of what's going to the plant is almost that in a day, and that shows the significance. And we know we've seen what a significant impact those ponds are. So when you start taking every homeowner that does that thinking, well, it's just one sump pump, when you start putting 1,000 or 1,500 of those on there, now you're talking those truckloads. And think that semi is only about 7,000 to 9,000 gallons, and that pump is pumping every hour for how much? A house could load that semi. A house could load one of those semis. So it really is significant. So it's a lot of little pieces added together creates a really big problem. So just to know that that engineered fix is 11.7 million gallons of capacity. And almost in a day, we're shoving that much over capacity through our wastewater plant.
And my question is we have a part of town where you say it's normal, which I think is unacceptable. As somebody who's lived through several sewer backups, since moved from the neighborhood, and it's an awful experience to do to your neighbors. Why do we allow it to be called normal? When it's obviously not.
It's not normal.
How do we stop that neighborhood from doing that? Because it's not fair to the rest of the community. I mean, and this, what do we have for there should be fines. I mean, I hate to sound mean. Like I said, I dealt with the little kids. We had 4 feet of sewage in one of my houses, twice in 6 months.
We want
Horrible
that to be the
experience.
last alternative. We want to be able to work with the property owners to make reasonable changes that can be made, but it has to start someplace.
But we've
We
been
discussed
we've been
that.
doing that since '96.
I know.
So we've been
also
trying to
have
make these arrangements for 25 years, and it's not working. And I can think of several houses, do you turn in your friends? No. I know several people, they just don't care. They pump it in there. They don't care. So how do we go about saying, okay, we're serious about this now, this needs to stop?
Well, we thought of the idea of when they were changing out the water meters, that somebody would go with them to check on the sump pumps at the same time. Well, it's really two different issues, and they didn't want to get a
Well, I agree
black
with that.
eye
You wanna get
over
a water
that.
meters
The
changed.
next one was when the assessor goes out and does and does that to check that out, and that's not good either, because they have a tough enough time doing the assessing work. So it would end up having to be wastewater going door to door, or hiring someone to go door to door and make that check. Now, you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to get in the house, and when they say, no, you're not coming into my house, then we just write their address down and give it to Dennis. We're not going to have our people argue with them at the front door, okay? We want to help.
So Glenn, there was a time in probably the 60s and 70s where the sanitary sewers mains were in backyards, in the same area where the
Yep.
natural stormwater flow would go. And over time, that flow has been interrupted because either of settling that has happened, or someone at the down end of the drainage, put in some landscaping so all the water really can't flow easily through there, and then you end up with issues like that. So my question is there, it's unacceptable, obviously, to open up a manhole cover and let the pond flow directly into the sanitary sewer. But is there any way of securing that in those neighborhoods where the sanitary sewer is in the backyard?
Yeah, we have a couple of ideas. One is raising those manholes so that they would be above the normal ponding level, number one. That would just defer them to open the top and then put a pump and pump it in. The other thing, we could weld them shut, which we have done some places, but that's not really acceptable because we have to go out there and maintain those things, and we'd have to cut that weld off every time. We could put padlocks on them, but that doesn't work either because you don't get sealed all the way around. It's, you have to put a hinge and the padlock on. So there's no real good methods. Raising them would be the least expensive, but it doesn't preclude pumping into them. It just is what it is.
Mr. May.
What is the cost of treating all that water?
Well, you know what your rates are. There's a cost per thousand. Is there like $5.36 a thousand or something? I can't remember off the top of my head either. But there's a rate for that, and that's what it costs for every gallon that goes there.
Well, part of the problem with that formula is the fact that the water that's going in there as excess stormwater doesn't need to be treated.
No.
So it's completely unnecessary to route it there. Now, part of the basement backup problem that we have, and a lot of it in these older neighborhoods, isn't just the stormwater, it's the age and the size and the design of the infrastructure. So as we catch a rap for our debt load and the other work that we've done and how aggressive we are on You know, people think they're street projects. Well, they're street projects usually driven on the need to repair, replace, and upgrade the buried infrastructure. And unfortunately, to get to it, you can't come in from the side, you gotta come down from the top, which means you open up the streets. And I think the city has done a great job of getting after that infrastructure. And you look at the severity and the frequency of those impacts, and they've gone down. Well, if my house is the one that's got 4 feet of sewage in it, it doesn't matter how good the city's done, because I'm still impacted, and I get that. And I think we need to continue that effort. I think we need to continue the education about what the impacts are, what the solutions are, and then hopefully get educated cooperation. And then there's always that little bit of public shaming as the neighbors figure out what the problem is. The percentage of people that knowingly do the rotten thing are gonna go down, and the other people that figured out they're doing the rotten thing is gonna go up. And there is something to neighbor shaming, not making them the cop. And I sure don't wanna make our public works and our assessing office and everything else, they don't need to be the sump pump cops. We've got a pretty good permit program. It's, I think, very generous about letting people have a winter solution so we don't have skating rinks and ice dams on our sidewalks. And I just think we need to continue to educate people. And for the most part, when people understand why, the vast majority of people do the right thing and they do it when they need to. There's always going to be the spoilers out there. We can't always live to the lowest denominator, but I think we need to continue with the aggressive and visioned projects that we do to try to keep our infrastructure moving forward.
Thank you, Glenn. Anything more? Dennis?
I'm not angry like Glenn.
No,
Well, Dr. Meister just returned from vacation. I am counting the hours down to when I leave for vacation tomorrow. So, Commerce Park, we acted on that. Anderson Addition, you rezoned that property. Doug Anderson's expanding his facility out there. I've spent considerable time there. 7 individual lots that we needed to get title work done on. I'm meeting with Dan Butel early tomorrow morning to finalize that addition. Sharon mentioned the reviewing the specs and the bids on the wastewater upgrades. I made a note here on the property on Highway 19 that's deteriorating. And we did receive a complaint from the building department of outdoor storage of stuff. It's been an ongoing problem for several years. I met with the elderly homeowner. He's having a surgical procedure on November 30th. He said, if I survive, I will get my yard cleaned up. So
November 30th?
I'm sorry, April 30th.
Okay.
Pardon me, April 30th. Wrong. And I did see his son and a granddaughter helping clean up the exterior of the house this past weekend.
John?
Just a question, Dennis. Did, you had an extra form to fill out for the sale of the land in the industrial park. Did that get accomplished, or are we still waiting for that permit or whatever?
We are still on a holding pattern while the documents get reviewed again at both the federal and state level, and now we've got a third federal agency involved on the Endangered Species Act.
Oh, really? Oh, great.
There might be an endangered species in the wetland.
Okay, thank you, Dennis.
I just want to say that the neighbors, I think, really appreciate the action you're taking on as far as cleaning up that residence, and thank you for doing
We want
that.
it cleaned up. I don't want to prosecute. I don't want
No,
to, I mean,
right.
that doesn't address the issue. And he has been responsive to me, but he's not been responsive to the neighbors in cleaning.
Right. And you've been handling it in a very humane, nice manner, and I thank you for that, and thank you for taking action on it. Thank you.
Agenda item number 29 is the information items. Agenda item number 30 is the listing of upcoming meetings. Agenda item number 31 is to consider adjourning this meeting.
I'll move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John to adjourn. Discussion? If not, we'll move.
Just a question here. It looks like we made it through the whole meeting, Kyle, without you having to leave. Apparently, there's no word on your situation.
Either that or his cell phone's not working.
Oh, good. I just say from behalf of the council, good luck to you and your wife. So.
With that, we'll move to a vote. Close the voting, and
He's out the door.
we're adjourned.